Hello, everybody in Wide Range Media Land. This is Ralph Perez from Horror and Coffee. That's right, we're still around. Horror and Coffee goes back to 2011 when Victor and I started it up with our reviews of movies and Blu-rays and DVDs, and it was great. And I'm still carrying the tradition. This is, again, Ralph Perez of Horror and Coffee, and my guest for Horror and Coffee today is Silvio Lafrosia from Wide Range Media. How are you, Silvio?
Hey, I'm very happy to be here today discussing one of my favorite things, horror and
That's
coffee.
right. How do you like your coffee, Silvio?
Black. No
Really?
sugar. Absolutely.
Oh, my God, black? No, I can't do that.
Café Bustelo. All the
I
way.
have Butelo, too, but I put the leche. I put the milk, dude. I'd be
No.
like, okay, this is light and sweet. It's a Puerto Rican thing.
No.
You know? Is that the norm? I mean, that's how a lot of Puerto Ricans like it, light and sweet.
Absolutely.
Is that something that people from Argentina prefer, or is that just you?
No. In Argentina, we'll have something called un cortadito, which is a small espresso type, and that'll have some
Oh, okay.
sugar, But I've just kind of gotten used to just black and straight, and
Dang, dude.
that's the way I like it. Even when I drink it iced, I'll drink iced Bustelo, and yeah, straight up.
That's crazy, dude. All right. So yeah, we are here. And, the reason why we decided to do this, one of the reasons is it's a very special reason, actually. We are in the year 2018. And this October, it marks 50 years that two of the most iconic, two of many, of course, but two of the most iconic, memorable horror films in cinematic history was released. I am talking about Night of the Living Dead by George A. Romero and Rosemary's Baby by Roman Polanski. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
Polanski.
Yeah.
And, those two films came out in the same month, in the same year, 1968. I wasn't born yet. Okay? I was still to show up. Those two movies were released in October of 1968. I was released the following March. So basically, it kind of
predates
worked
you.
out. Yeah, it predates me. So, but I remember seeing the movies growing up. Later on, when I was a teenager, that's when I actually saw them. And there was an appreciation there, but I didn't really grasp how good these were until later on, as I got more and more into horror movies, and my taste, my palate, my cinematic palate, so to speak, continued to grow in that way. So what we're gonna do for this Horror and Coffee is we're gonna talk about both these movies. At the end of the thing, we're gonna also rate them, because we rate our movies by coffee cups, 5 being the best, the most, and 1 meaning not good at all. But which obviously we're not gonna do that to these two masterpieces. But we're gonna do that at the end. Silvio, Rosemary's Baby was a film that when and I know you're gonna go into it, but when I first saw it, I was like, well, there's not so much horror as there is more drama. But yet, there is an element of horror to it that is very unique for its time, and I think it was a film before its time.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, Rosemary's Baby came out in 1968. As you said, it was predated you. I was only 4 years old when it came out. He ended up writing something that was deeply disturbing, very dark, with huge satanic themes. Now, here's the thing about horror at the time, and you know this as well as I do, and Victor and anybody else, all of our friends who are all horror fans, like The Blob, that would bring in, the guy and his date to watch the scary movie, and hopefully the girl will cuddle up next to him because it was such a scary
Yeah, that
film.
was the point.
Exactly, that was the point of
You know what
horror
happens
at the time.
nowadays? They'd be like, I gotta take my girlfriend to go see On Golden Pond or something.
Yeah, that has changed completely from what
Yeah.
those times. But then along comes this movie, and this movie with its dark undertones and heavy satanic things. Let's put all of those aside. This is the one that we really are focusing on because it was so groundbreaking as we look back. Rosemary's Baby involves a young couple that move into what is basically a creepy Gothic New York building. And the actual building is the Dakota Apartments in downtown New York. And if you've ever heard of the Dakota, it is where there have been many celebrities, and infamously, that's where John Lennon lived, and outside of that building was where he was shot and killed.
That's right.
So this is an actual
That is
building that
right.
people
That
can
is.
go see, and it was the backdrop for this movie. The building in the book was called the Bramfield. And interestingly enough, the reason it was called that was in homage of Bram Stoker.
Really?
That was why
You
he
see,
called,
I didn't know
yes,
that.
I found this out, looked it up a little bit. But anyway, so this is all starting to build up to this creepiness of this building. This young couple moves in, and then little by little, weird things start to occur. Somebody commits suicide that she had
Right,
befriended.
Hutch, right?
And
Something like that.
before you know it,
Yeah.
yeah. And then she is befriended by these weird neighbors, and things start to
Yeah.
occur. Then all of a sudden, through a dream sequence, she ends up being pregnant, and strange things happen with her pregnancy, and all of it leads up to the fact that this pregnancy is not hers and her husband, it's hers and the
Right.
devil.
She's awake, she sees.
She don't see. As long as she ate the mouse, she can't see nor hear. She's like dead now. Sing.
And she's being protected until this baby is born and actually taken away from her to be elevated as the living son of the devil. And that's basically what this story is. It's bringing to earth the living son of the devil. And of course, that's where the movie ends. Everything is done subtly. There isn't any big visual portrayals of demonic things. We hear Hail
Right.
Satan, and we see a little bit of demonic stuff. And as I was about to say earlier, it wasn't until I rewatched this movie, because, again, like we said, we were very young. By the time I saw it, it was a TV movie that I had seen, and Rosemary's Baby was basically a sanitized TV version. And it showed some things, and it was a thinking person's movie. So if we were very young, it was kind of hard to follow a little bit, and it might have felt a little slow. But as an adult watching it, and then
Yeah.
watching the original version, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe
Right,
that they
right.
actually did this in 1968. This woman, portrayed by Mia Farrow, was raped by the devil.
Right.
And she was all drugged up. These neighbors take her away. Well, she thought it was a dream. It was a dream sequence type. It was played out as a dream sequence for her. And that's the ambiguity of this
Yeah.
movie, is that they try to portray it like, okay, did this really happen? Or is this
Yeah, she
something
got
she
scratches.
believed happened? So that's the little part that's left up there in the air. But what really occurs at that point is, and as I said, I saw it for the first time, there is a demonic rape of this woman. And then the following day she wakes up, she's all scratched up, and right, and her husband says, well, I didn't want to miss baby night because they were trying to make a baby. And she's like, well, you did this to me while I was passed out. So and I'm thinking, holy crap, this is 1968 and they're doing this stuff. And and from there on, it takes even a deeper, darker turn as she's going through these pains of pregnancy, which were normal for anybody who's pregnant for the first time and on her own, because her husband's this actor who's never home.
Yeah.
But then also extreme pain, obviously, because there's a demon gestating inside of her. Of course there's going to be pain. Nobody's going to know what to do. But, and it starts to transform her, and she's going through all of this, and then they present her to this creepy other doctor to take care of her, and all of this stuff going on as she's trying to gain control and take control of it on her own and get away from it. There was even talk of abortion. Her friends that she managed to get together were talking openly about abortion.
And that movie came out at a time before abortion was legalized in this country.
You know, I'm trying to find a time date when Roe v. Wade came around, but yes, I think
1972.
okay, well, there you go. See, this was pre-legalized abortion, so they're talking about this openly. And, of course, it's in a New York setting with young people and all of that. And then at the very end, she has no control over it as she tries to do the right thing, goes to another doctor. The doctor turns her in because this is a hysterical woman. She can't possibly be in charge. So what does this doctor do? He sends her over and calls the husband and the other doctor. And when she was trying to escape, she gets pulled back in. The baby is born and taken away from her. And, of course, obviously, spoilers to all of this. It is a 50-year-old movie. But anyway, she comes to find out that it is the devil's baby. Here they are all heralding this newborn baby, this weird...
Adrian.
These weird cultish people. And she goes to see it, and she freaks out because she's like, what happened to his eyes? And the guy says, he has his father's eyes. That was the creepiest line of every... And then, Hail Satan, all in the background. And
he shall lay the wasteland, and he started getting into this big eulogy or whatever.
But
I don't know.
Here's the other thing. You would think at that point she would run away screaming. She looks at the baby. Obviously, it's a part of her. And there's this soft smile, and the movie fades away.
What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?
He has his father's eyes.
What are you talking about? Guy's eyes are normal. What have you done to him, you maniac?
Satan is his father, not Guy. He came up from hell and begat a son of mortal woman. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan!
Satan is his father, and his name is Adrian. He shall overthrow the mighty and lay waste their temples. He shall redeem the despised and wreak vengeance in the name of the burned and the tortured. Hail, Adrian! Hail, Adrian! Hail, Satan! Hail, Satan!
He chose you out of all the world, out of all the women in the whole world. He chose you. He arranged things because he wanted you to be the mother of his only living son.
His power is stronger than stronger. His might shall last longer than longer. It's Satan!
No!
Yeah, like they decide she makes a decision to care for the child, and they want her to.
Exactly. And here's the thing. This movie doesn't have a correct, or not a correct, an ending that satisfied everything. It was, ambiguous. What happened? Where did this all go? This was something that wasn't seen back then. So this was groundbreaking, and it introduced and opened up the doors to so many other movies. 1973's The Exorcist, 1976 The Omen. So many satanic movies that came afterward of high production quality and well-done movies. And Rosemary's Baby is the one that opened it all 50 years ago. And, and made things possible, like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which was only, 10 years ago. So, yes, I can't say enough about, the road that Rosemary's Baby, the path that it paved, making all these other movies available and possible afterwards.
You know what's amazing about that? You're absolutely right when you talk about how it paved the way. We must also, as you guys out there that are listening to this, also needs to be aware also of the zeitgeist of when this movie was made. The 1960s was a time of social turmoil. There was a lot of things going around, a lot of changes, okay? We had the civil rights movement. We had women's rights. And a lot of that is portrayed in Rosemary's Baby, if you think about it. I think Roman Polanski knew what he was doing because she started being treated like she was some kind of, object. Like, okay, you're gonna, they started treating her like she didn't know, like that she was just like not this independent woman. Rosemary was just this little pawn and this little whatever, and at the end she kind of gives into it. It's funny. It's funny. It reminds me a lot of Handmaiden's Tale. The way they
Yes.
the way they make these, if you watch a Handmaiden's Tale, these poor women that they put them through, what they subjugate them to, that's kind of what happened to Rosemary in this movie. But it wasn't like instant. It wasn't like a shock. It was a progression, right? And
Right.
Here's another thing. Not just civil rights, not just women's rights, but the 1960s was also a very a time of spiritual questioning. Spiritual questioning: is there a God? Is God dead? Was on the cover of Time magazine, and you actually, I think, see that in the movie itself. I think it was Rosemary
Yes.
looking at the magazine and
Yep.
said that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy,
Yep.
after he says, "Oh, hail Satan," he says, "God is dead," in the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is that the movie came out in 1968. Just 2 years before that, in 1966, Anton LaVey, a self-professed Satanist, started the first legal Church of Satan in San Francisco. The whole freedom of religion. I can worship. Well, okay, I'm going to worship the devil. Even though
Right.
he didn't really, in the theology he believed in, it was more like of a naturalistic atheism that he actually believed and professed. He didn't really believe in the devil. What he believed, he used that as the symbolism of human selfishness, that we should be allowed to be as selfish as we should be, have as much sex as we want, have as much whatever as we want, for me, 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 me. And of course that bled into the sexual revolution, the free love movement, Woodstock, all of that stuff that was happening at that time. So for him to proclaim that in 1966, and then for this to come out a couple years later, it was kind of like a movie that kind of said, yeah, this is it. This is the new age of it. This is the questioning now, the big questioning. Is there a God, or is there a devil? Is this real? Is it not real? Which the dream sequence in the movie covers in a crazy way. Here's another crazy thought. Roman Polanski was his fiance was gonna be the actress instead, Sharon Tate, who sadly and incidentally was murdered by Charles Manson while she was pregnant with their
8
child.
months. Yep.
So, for that to happen, and for Roman Polanski to, and I think we all know, and for those of you who do not know this, which is sad, it's a sad result. I think there was, the guy was a brilliant director, but obviously, just because you're a brilliant director doesn't mean that you got it all there and you got it all together. He's hiding in Europe somewhere. Is that right, Sylvia?
Right. What happened was he was convicted of statutory rape with a 13-year-old.
Yes.
And he actually did serve some time in prison, but was released early incorrectly. And at that point, the judge tried to reinstate the time still left on his sentence, and instead of presenting himself to the authorities, he fled to Europe so that he would not have to serve any more time. So he cannot come back into the United States. He would be immediately arrested if he ever came back to the United States.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, he could stay there based on what
Yes.
he did. But thanks for the movie. Hey, okay, we got a story here.
We can also add that was his first American-made major movie. He had not made Chinatown yet. That came out in 1974. Later on.
Okay.
So this was his first movie into a larger scope. So he was unproven at the time. In fact, he went through a couple of things where he felt that he was about to get fired at any time because he was so far behind schedule. Another director whose name I can't remember right now actually spoke with him and told him, "Don't worry about it." He says, What are the executives telling you?" He says, "Well, they're telling me I'm behind schedule." He says, "Well, what about the rushes?" Which the rushes are those little snippets that they send to the executives to show them this is what we're doing so far. Polanski told him, "Well, they like what we're doing, And the guy told him, he says, don't worry about it. He says, nobody ever gets fired for being behind in schedule. He says, but if they don't like your rushes, then you're going to get fired. He says, just keep doing your work. And he did. And he completed this movie, which turned out to be actually a horror masterpiece if we really look back into it.
It's its subtlety that makes it like that. It's subtlety.
Definitely.
You know,
definitely. I mean, there was nothing glaring except for that one.
The dream
like
sequence.
I said, this was the dream sequence, and you actually see, the fingernails.
Yeah,
and
the
hands of
demonic
the devil
hands
on the skin. Yeah, and you see a little bit of the eyes, and that kind of foreshadows later in the movie when she says what's wrong with his eyes, and he has his father's eyes.
Right.
So we get to see that part. But again, the sanitized version, I had never seen any of that, so that was all totally implied. And to a young me, maybe at 15 watching this, I was like, I didn't get it too much.
Me neither,
but
man.
Later
me
on,
neither.
I was like, oh my God. Yes, just an incredible movie. Another little fun fact about it: the producer, who actually bought the rights to this book before the book was released. He had heard, it coming out. All of Hollywood did, and he was the first one to it. Was William Castle, and this guy, you've probably heard the name. He was very big in B-movie horror from earlier, and kind of what I had just mentioned earlier. That horror until that point was gimmicky stuff. He was actually the guy who did The Tingler. And if you remember, we talked about that.
Oh, he was the one.
William Castle came up with that. He came up with the whole gimmick that the Tingler is loose in the theater, screams so he doesn't attach himself to your spine,
Tickle,
and everybody in the theater was, well, yeah, that's what Alex said.
That's what Alex said,
Anyway.
yeah.
So, but he wanted to direct it, and he looked at it and he's like, I can't direct this. And somebody later told him, he's like, yeah, this is bigger than you. You need somebody else. And they picked up Polanski, and Polanski did a great job with it.
That's amazing, man. I have to say, though, to this day, though, as great as that movie is, I have some gripes with it.
Go ahead.
And I'm going to tell you what the gripes are real quick.
Sure.
One, weren't all those old people, when they were standing around her on the table, all naked and stuff like that?
They were all naked, yes.
Weren't they cold? And the reason why I'm saying that is because
there might have been some shrinkage.
Yeah, that's one thing. And what's funny? Guy, the husband, he's standing there naked too.
Yes.
Like, is this okay?
Yes.
He looked like such an idiot.
That was the thing. Oh man, when I saw that, I actually rewound it. I was like, holy crap, he's there too.
Yeah, he was
like,
part of it.
what-
He was
and-
part of the whole thing.
And that's when I started putting things together.
That's why she
his
spat on his
acting
face at the end.
Yes, it was very well done.
Now, what's also funny? I kept on laughing because you know how like everybody, don't you get an awkward moment sometimes when there's a group of people doing something or whatever, and then when you're done with the rhetoric, that one person just said something and it's kind of like off, like you missed it. You understand? I'll give you an example. In Rosemary's Baby, at the end, when everybody's hailing Satan, right? And everybody, Satan, and roll chanting, everybody stops. And then all of a sudden you hear the Asian dude, Hail Satan!
Is stronger than stronger. His might shall last longer than longer. Satan!
He was so.
It
out
was
of
off.
place.
I
He
was like, shut up.
when I first saw him, like, what? Where did that come from? Yeah, it was really.
I mean, he was standing. I don't even think he knew he was hailing. I was like, let me just let me just go along with this. I just came here to hang. I think that's what happened. I don't think he was a real devil worshiper. I think he just came to visit a friend, and he ended up in that room, and he's like, you know what? I don't know what's going on. She's talking about the eyes.
Yeah,
She's flipping out. She's holding a knife, so I'm not going anywhere near her.
that's right. She's holding the knife.
I'm not gonna. So everybody's saying Hail Satan. You know what? I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with it, and I'll research this later. I just need to get out of here in one piece. I don't want that woman stabbing me with the knife. Now, my third. Go ahead.
There's an interesting scene in that movie, and I remember watching it. And again, this is all from rewatches, because if I was talking about this from the first time I saw it, I would be lost because it was a long time ago. So rewatching it not too long ago, very recently, and one of the scenes that struck me was like when she walks out into traffic. This is New York City. It's filmed on location, and she's walking out into traffic, and all these cars that are coming down this busy avenue as she's crossing the street are stopping, whatever. And you think, okay, that was pretty well done. Well, then I research a little bit and come to find out she actually walked into traffic. Roman Polanski told her, look, nobody's going to run over a pregnant woman.
Right, because she had the paddings or whatever under her to make her look pregnant.
Exactly. So she's walking, and we're New Yorkers. We know what New York taxi cab drivers are like. They don't stop for anybody, almost. And they were all stopping, and all this traffic is stopping. They actually filmed this a couple of times, and I read, doing the research, none of the cameramen would do it because they thought if this woman gets hit while I'm filming this, I'm liable. So Roman Polanski was manning the camera on those shots.
Oh, he was willing to take the hit, huh? All right.
He did it, yep.
Yeah, he should have thought ahead 30 years down the line.
Yeah, when you start hearing things like this, and that's when you put them up there, aside from the statutory rape and all of that stuff, okay, I can understand that. I'm not going to set it aside and say, okay, let's just look at the art. No, but he's definitely up there in the way that he was a director with Stanley Kubrick, Alfred Hitchcock, and all those guys that just
but you know what ticked me off,
weird
though?
stuff for their art.
You know what ticked me off though? This is the third gripe, and I'll be done. I remember seeing the sequel they made.
Oh,
did you see that?
No, I didn't, but I read about it.
I saw No, I'm not talking about the book. I'm talking about the movie. They actually made a movie. Said, "Look what happened to Rosemary's Baby."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing that movie on TV. It was on Channel 11. I'm telling you, I'm not kidding.
It was a made-for-TV movie.
And I just watched it, and I saw by the end of the movie, I pretty much decided. I pretty much realized what happened to Rosemary's Baby. You want to know what happened to Rosemary's Baby?
Shoot.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He was a drifter at the end, like nothing. I was like, you people at the end of the first movie are hailing. You got the Asian guy not knowing what he's talking about, trying to jump into the action, right? And everybody's like, "Hail Satan! He shall lay down the wasteland, and he shall rise the mountains and lay the desolate, and all that." He's like talking all this, right? Right?
Yeah.
And then she decides to take care of the baby. And so, now what? Now what? What does he do? He becomes a hipster. Like, really? Like, this is what the Antichrist does? I thought, hey, look, at least with The Omen, you had a goal here. You had somewhere to go with this. He was fulfilling biblical prophecy. It was we can go on another whole thing on that, right? There's a whole trilogy that you can, and it worked, and it was like, at the end he meets Jesus, but here, it's like, look what happened to Rosemary's Baby. I'm like, you know what? That was a waste of time. You could have left the poor woman alone. Leave it at the end of the actual film. That's it. These stupid little sequels that they try to do to try to keep milking this thing didn't work. And they should have left it alone. Leave you thinking. Just let you think. A lot of people don't know that other sequel exists. And may I strongly suggest, don't bother watching it. You'll waste 2 hours of your life. And life is short. That's all I got to say about that. With Rosemary, it's definitely a film ahead of its time. And it did introduce, like Silvio said, the inspiration of films like The Exorcist, The Omen, and all that. And even, I will say this right now, in October of 2018, it definitely has put an influence on the making of a film that was released this year, which I arguably can say is the best horror film of 2018, and I'm talking about Hereditary. Oh, my God. When I saw that movie, And a lot of people said, "Oh, there's a lot of Rosemary Baby elements to this," and I was like, "Really?" And after I finished seeing it, I was like, "Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's not quite there's
Well,
echoes of it."
well, there you go. That's why we're talking about it today. 50 years ago, this movie is still impacting horror movie making today. That you can get things like like Hereditary, and it can point back to something like Rosemary's Baby 50 years back, and saying, okay, this is where it all started. So, and that's great. But we've got another movie to talk about that is also came
That's
out
right.
that
That's
same
right.
year in October of 1968 with a little bit less fanfare. And here's the difference if we look at it
Right.
on a scale. Roman Polanski, although it was his first movie, had a little bit more of a draw and a name. Rosemary's Baby was made with a little higher of a budget. It was a major movie production. It had some other high names in it as well, and it got a huge release. But the other movie we want to talk about actually has as much groundbreaking in horror. In fact, it started a whole complete horror subgenre, basically created it. And of course, we're talking about George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead of 1968.
That's right. That's right.
Also,
God rest his soul because he passed
he
away.
passed
this year.
away last year. Yeah, yeah.
It was a year ago. Already?
Yeah, we're coming up on a
Wow.
year. Yeah.
Okay.
And his movie released with a lot less fanfare because it was a movie that was made on a shoestring budget. It was made with $130,000, I think, and it originally started with a lot less than that, as 10 people decided, let's put in $600 each and make this movie. George A. Romero, a filmmaker from the Bronx. Let's hear it for the Bronx.
That's right. He's a Bronx kid, man. Come on.
That's right. But he went to I forget what school, but he was living out in Pittsburgh, and he was doing industrial films and commercials. He was cutting his teeth on that, and he basically wanted to do a full-length feature film and actually see if he could make some money and if he could actually do this. And so together with Russo and a couple of other people, they decided, okay, we can write this script, a script that originally was Aliens, and it was supposed to be some sort of comedy. And
it was supposed to be called Monster something. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be some aliens that came down and kind of infiltrated amongst teenagers and blah, blah, blah. It was supposed to be a little bit of a comedy. But there was one thing that was written into it that brought it all out, which was flesh eating. These aliens ate.
Cannibalism.
Yeah. And John Russo said, okay, let me write something. He ended up writing the entry scene of the actual movie, which was the cemetery and the run into the farmhouse. And from there, it just took off. And we got what we got, which is Night of the Living Dead. Again, groundbreaking. I'm going to let you talk about it first.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. The first George A. Romero film I ever saw was actually not Night of the Living Dead. It was actually Dawn of the Dead.
Yep.
Right? My friend Victor showed it to me during the summer, our summer vacations from school, and during middle school and into high school. I would hang out in his house and be like, Ralph, watch this. And he would pop in that movie, and it was great. He had the soundtrack. He had the record of the soundtrack. He loved the soundtrack. And I saw the movie and I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was grossed out.
This is Dawn of the Dead.
I'm talking about Dawn of the
okay.
Dead. And then I eventually saw Night of the Living Dead. I saw bits of it initially. And then I started realizing that, John Carpenter himself was paying tribute to that film in the movie in Halloween 2, which he produced, didn't direct, he produced.
Right.
Towards the beginning of the film, Michael Myers is walking into a house, and he's just there to pick up a knife. He didn't say, "Excuse me, can I have a knife, please?" He kind of did it behind the old lady's back because she was talking. She was watching from the kitchen doorway her husband sleeping in front of the TV. It was Halloween night, and they were playing like horror films on TV, and they were showing the beginning of Night of the Living Dead. And I remember her reaching back to get her knife, but the knife wasn't there anymore, but there was a little bit of Michael's blood there, obviously because he was shot earlier, you know. And
5 times.
She 6, actually.
Okay.
He was shot 6 times. I shot him 6 times, remember? And she screams, and you see Michael walk off. Now, you know, but I'll always remember the exchange from the TV. They're coming to get you, Barbara. And you hear Barbara going, stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of
You know, and that was something Victor and I used to walk around and say all the time. Stop it. You're ignorant. You know, like it was just funny to say. And then I saw the remake, which George A. Romero actually had a hand in 1990. And Tom Savini had a part in that as well. Right. And the guy from Candyman played Ben.
Right.
You know, which I can't remember his name right now because that's why I'm saying the guy from Candyman. But, you know, and I loved that movie. I got a copy of it here. I was like, oh, my God, you know. And then finally, eventually I said, you know what, I got to see the original finally. I got to see what started this whole thing. So I finally saw it. And as a matter of fact, I saw it again after George A. Romero's passing. Victor and I went to a screening of it to pay tribute to him at the Alamo Draft House up in Yonkers. They had a special screening in the theater. I was able to actually see it in the movie theater. You know, I had a copy of it at home already, but to go to the movies to see it the way it's meant to be seen, right, with a crowd, it was awesome. And the story is so unique and so. You know what's you know what I love about that story? Its simplicity. Less is more in that film, man. Let me tell you. You know, all you needed was the house, the farmhouse. That's it. You didn't have to make it complicated. And you didn't even have to get an explanation as to why this was happening to them, why this was happening. You knew. You had the sense of what was going on. They knew it, too. And they tried to get on the TV and people arguing on TV and emergency broadcast. Got it. It's a huge thing. It's obviously happening at a bigger scale, which added to the horror because it was still unexplained. Why? Right? And throughout the years, other zombie movies have always grasped onto that why. Most of them, at least. The Walking Dead. Nobody knows why this started, right? You know, so it's all about that. It's all about the mystery of the why. Forget the why. Just don't get eaten. Make sure you shoot them in the head. That's the only way to bring them down.
Well, there you go. You just mentioned a couple of things. You know, first of all, a flesh-eating, slow-moving zombie, shoot him in the head. All of those things were all created by George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Before that, first of all, you know, the word zombie wasn't even used in that movie. They were ghouls. You know, later it was attributed and called zombies. But even George A. Romero said zombies was that, you know, that mythical thing from, you know, the Caribbean.
Right, the Creole voodoo thing, yeah.
Voodoo, exactly, where, you know, a magic medicine man, you know, had control of an unliving dead person, and basically it was his slave.
Right.
To use however he wanted it to be used, whether this zombie would come up to kill somebody or to exact revenge or whatever it may be. It was all up to that medicine man who brought it back to life.
Yeah.
And that was it, you know. But then, you know, George A. Romero presents these flesh-eating ghouls that later on become zombies, and he laid the groundwork and the rules for these zombies, and they've been modified and changed in a couple of things here and there, but still, even to today, The Walking Dead, you just mentioned the popularity of that for the past 10, 12 years, it's the same thing. You got to shoot them in the head, if they bite you, you become a zombie. All of those rules started with George A. Romero.
That's right.
And try to think of any other filmmaker within any genre that created something that eventually became something else, and everybody built on top of it. I really can't think of it. Vampires was not created by Universal. The Frankenstein monster, or different things like that. But the zombie, the way we know it today, all goes back to this point in October of 1968, 50 years ago,
That is right.
which launched everything that we know today.
It's crazy. I'm 49 years old now, and I'm gonna turn 50 in March of 2019.
It's all downhill from here, man.
So don't say that, man. Come on. Well, you're making me feel bad.
I already crested that
God,
hill.
I'm gonna die. Well, you seem fine, so I think I'm gonna be fine too.
There you go.
Dang it. So no, I'm as old as that movie now. Both of
Yeah.
those movies. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. Again, these films set. I mean, we think of that funny one, Return of the Living Dead, right?
Yes.
We think of Zombieland.
Yes.
Remember that one? We think
Yep.
of what other? I mean, there's been a remake of Dawn of the Dead. There's been
Yep.
28 Days. Later,
Right.
stuff like that. As a matter of fact, here's something. George A. Romero was actually influenced. In my research of it, he was actually influenced by the book I Am Legend.
I Am Legend. Yes, he in fact even said, "I am doing a cheap ripoff of I Am Legend."
It turned out to be a better ripoff because I Am Legend. I read the book.
Yeah.
I actually read the book and I loved it. I loved it. It's a short story.
Yep,
And I
yep.
loved the book. And then when they released it a few years ago with Will Smith, I watched it and I was like, that's not what the book has.
Right.
But you know
Yeah.
how they do. They deviate away from the whatever. But
Well, there's two other adaptations.
yes,
of that
Last
book
Man
a lot
on
earlier
Earth with Charlton Heston.
No. You got the right title.
Wrong.
You mixed it up with another one.
Oh.
Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, The Omega Man with Charlton Heston.
Omega, that's right.
Yes.
You got me.
And both of them based on the same book.
Yes, you're right. Right. I got excited. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the influences are there. If you really want to find the seeds to that, you can refer to I Am Legend.
Go read the book. Yep.
The idea of the running zombie, I have a problem with it. Because when I saw the remake of Dawn of the Dead, like when did it come out? Like 10 years ago or something like that? More than that?
Yeah. About 10, 12
I was
years
like,
ago,
you know what? The movie was good. It's not like the movie wasn't good. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yes,
I have a copy
I
of it
enjoyed
here
too.
at home.
Yep, and I've watched it a few times.
But they didn't seem like zombies to me. They seem more like just rabid crazies.
Yeah,
Right?
the crazy.
Because if you're
like,
rotting,
28
if you're decomposing, you can't run like that. Otherwise, you'll fall apart all over the place.
right.
Let's be scientific here, okay? I mean, I know the whole thing is fake. I get it. That's
Right.
what makes it fun. But if you're decomposing, you can't really move that well. You got rigor mortis and all this other stuff going on with you. And what are you gonna do? You're gonna go on a Jesse Owens sprint after me because you want to eat? No.
Usain Bolt.
Yeah, come on.
Well, yeah, I do agree with you, and it kind of you start thinking about it, it's like, wait a minute, where are these guys getting their energy from?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
now
I
some
know
other
they eat a lot
people-
of protein, but come on.
Yeah, some other people have posited that that in the early part of a reanimation, they still have some stored energy, but maybe after a certain amount of time, they'll end up becoming the lumbering, walking, slow zombies until they can finally walk no more and they decompose. And basically try to wait
Yeah,
them
but
out.
here's the problem with that. People,
Early on, if they're that fast and that quick, they could,
I don't know.
create a. It was just something that somebody mentioned out, and I agree. I kind of like the slow lumbering zombie a little bit.
Yeah.
But sometimes you start thinking, it's like, wait a minute, if they're that slow, couldn't we really take them out? And if you look at it, even Night of the Living Dead really doesn't show that they took over and completely killed off the world.
It was
This
the
is only
beginning
just
of it.
Night of
It
the
was
Living
just the
Dead.
beginning
It was
of
the
it.
beginning of it, and we really, at the end of it, there's a posse. So there are still people in charge killing people, and in fact, the downer of an ending where poor Ben, who manages to live through that night, sticks his head up and bang, gets shot in the, and then he gets thrown on the pile just like any other zombie.
Yeah, they thought he was a zombie.
Yeah, exactly.
I still think it's
So-
racist. I'm kidding.
There's a lot of discussion about that as well.
There is. I know there is.
Yeah, there definitely is. There definitely is. But even George A. Romero said it himself. He said, look, I wasn't trying to make any type of statement or anything like that. The reason I casted Dwayne Jones was because he was the best one for the part. He auditioned the best out of everybody we auditioned for the role, and he took over that role.
There you go. That's it. That's all it needs. That's all that's needed.
That's all it
Yeah.
takes. Interestingly enough, I was just reading. I was doing a little bit of research. The L.A. Times critic reviewed the movie, and he put down, and this is, and again, excuse me, this is a quote from him. He says he was a very, oh God, if I could just find the quote exactly, but and he ended up calling him a very resourceful Negro.
What?
That was his quote. He's like,
Holy
it
cow!
a
Who
good
was
movie.
this guy?
Again, this is 1969, and somebody just pointed that
Archie
because
Bunker.
This was the first time a black African American got a lead role in any movie, and this was a
Wait a
B
minute, are
movie,
you
and it
sure
was
about
a low
that?
production. Absolutely. Even I know that we had roles with Sidney Poitier and things like that, but he was never the actual total leading man.
Wow.
Dwayne Jones, Ben, in this movie, was the leading man, and in fact, he was the last living man. And then, and he's our hero. He's the protagonist.
Yeah,
of
I
this
liked
movie.
his character, man. I was like, okay, dude, what do we got to do?
Absolutely. He took charge, and if you think about it, he struck a white woman. So think about it. That did not play over
When
very
I
well
saw
in the South
that,
back
I
then.
laughed. I was like, oh my God, that would not have flown here. And this
Because
time,
she smacked him, and he just smacked her right back.
oh, she smacked him.
Um,
That's right.
She smacks him first, and then he just smacks her
Well,
down.
because she was
And then
flipping
he-
out. She was flipping the script, so it was just like this whole thing was back and forth.
And then he also shoots Harry, who's a total jerk.
oh my
in this
God,
movie.
yeah.
And
He made me laugh,
and
though.
Then, and then he ends up being the last guy alive, and sadly, he gets shot like just any other ghoul in that movie, and gets thrown on the funeral pyre at the end.
Yeah.
He just gets thrown on top of the fire. But what I was trying to say there is an armed group of people that are still taking charge. So we really can't call it a total end of the world scenario.
No.
It was-
It was the beginning of the end, maybe. But
right.
but
Then
again,
later in Dawn, we see things happening a little bit more.
right.
And of course,
Well,
things-
Dawn of the Dead is not really a sequel, though. It's more of its own story, if you think about it.
yeah.
I mean, you
it is its
can
own story.
in
It
your
kind of
head.
picks up from something happened, and it takes off from there. And
I think so.
obviously, something happened that lasted more than just a single night because certain things happen. But let's
Right.
save that discussion for a Dawn of the Dead.
Of course.
And I've got a lot of things to mention about that one as
Oh,
well. I mean,
boy.
I love that movie, love it to death. But there are things that we can really talk about.
You know,
But,
what's
again-
amazing? Can I say one more
Mhm.
thing about Night of the Living Dead? One of
Yes,
the
absolutely.
things that really messed people up about that movie was, and this is not something they commonly did, but even back then, there were movies that did it before this movie came out. But it involved the death of a child and her becoming the zombie. Oh boy!
And well, perfect. This movie broke so many taboos, things
Yeah.
that were just not shown or done.
Yeah,
or
you don't
talked
do
about.
that. You don't do that
yeah.
in film.
Yeah, the death of a child, and then the child killing her mother.
Oh yeah, she
Yeah.
She ripped her apart. Yeah.
Yeah, there was matricide. I mean, this touched on so many things, and then to show one of these ghouls actually eating intestines, they showed it.
Well, they were eating. Actually, they weren't really eating intestines. Obviously,
Well,
they were.
no, of course not. But this was a graphical. Showing
Yeah.
of something that we had never seen before. This cannibalism, directly on screen.
Yeah.
And famously, Roger Ebert critiqued it, and he gave it a very bad review initially. And one of the reasons was, if you think back to the late '60s, and in fact, I've heard my father-in-law mention this so many times. Parents used to drop their kids off in the movie theaters in the morning, leave them there, with enough money to watch, to get in, get a popcorn and hang out, and then they would come pick them up. It was kind of like, instead of day camp, they would take them and drop them off at the movies, because the movies would show a serial, then they'd show, like a cartoon, then they'd show a double feature.
Oh yeah, you could be there all day.
You could be there all day.
I used to go to when I was a kid. It used to be like that. I used to go into the movie. I would come out. Oh my God, it's night.
Yeah, even us in the early '70s,
Yeah.
that was still occurring to a certain degree. So in the late '60s, this was something that they did a lot, and parents dropped kids off unattended to watch Night of the Living Dead. And Roger Ebert said that he was looking around and saw these kids totally freaked out. And of course, just imagine being a 10-year-old by yourself in a movie theater, and you're seeing, first of all, this lady eat a bug. And then after that truck exploded, they're ripping apart what was left and just eating it. And people were seeing this for the first time. And then, of course, you continue on down the movie, and the little girl reanimates and kills her mom. And then she gets killed. It's like, can you imagine being a 10-year-old by yourself watching this?
Yeah, that would.
And
yeah.
that's why Roger Ebert said he just saw kids just blank-faced. Not even with the strength to cry, because they were just blank-faced, petrified. And that's why he gave it such a terrible review.
I bet you
But later
$1
on,
million.
he turned that around.
I bet you $1 million. Those kids now are like probably the most hardest core horror fans right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure of it. Come on, let's.
Well, as you know, Trial by Fire.
Yeah.
That's how Pablo, my brother, became
With Dawn of the Dead,
horror
right?
fan.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah, I totally
snuck him in to see that
Yeah,
when he was 10 years old.
So, we're gonna start wrapping this up, but
Definitely.
I wanna we gotta give the ratings, the coffee cups, dude.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna tell you how many coffee cups I gave both films, and then I'll let you do it.
Go ahead.
I gave Rosemary's Baby. I'm gonna give it 3 coffee cups out of 5. It was a good watch. It is not the kind of movie, admittingly, I would want to pop in all the time. Like The Omen is like that. The Exorcist is a movie like that. But Rosemary's Baby, maybe I'll see it once every few years so I can remember it. But it's not really on top of my Blu-ray stack, so to speak.
Right.
So the box doesn't get too warm from my hands commonly. But it is a well-made film, and it had its strong plot element. And like I said earlier, it did kind of usher in a whole new age of horror that had a spiritual dynamic. And I love supernatural horror. And this one was very suggestive of it, and I appreciated that. Now, go ahead. Actually, how many coffee cups do you give Rosemary's Baby?
Again, when I first was introduced to it, I was introduced to a sanitized version of it. It wasn't until in retrospect, watching it. So if I were to break this up to when I first saw it, I would agree with you, and I would give it a 3. Looking back and having rewatched it just about a month ago, and knowing and everything that I just talked about, how it led up to what we love today, I would give it a 5. So I guess I would balance it out and say that it's worth 4 coffee cups.
Now, Night of the Living Dead. I'm going to go with the big one. The greatest brew. I'm talking about 5 coffee cups, man. This is a movie you can watch again and again, and it never grows old on you. It's 50, so what? It's good. I mean, you You can see its age, but you don't care about that. You care about the story. You care about what's happening, because that is exactly the same kind of scenario that can happen now. It can happen now. It doesn't have to be 1968 for something like that to happen. So I give it 5 coffee cups. It is a classic,
Right.
and it is the godfather of all the other zombie incarnations that are to come out later on. There's so many. God, I can't even think of. I mentioned a few earlier, but I can't even. I forgot one thing. Did you know that one of the reasons why John Carpenter used that footage from Night of the Living Dead was because he didn't have to worry about copyright claims?
That's right. Yes, because it was public domain.
It was public domain. I think it still is. Am I right? Or did they?
It still is. There has been, there's a new release coming out that's a 4K release.
Oh.
Where they've cleaned it all up. They've added a whole bunch of additional things, and actually they created a new copyright. So if you would try to take that, then you would be breaking copyright laws. But you could still go to the original versions that are all around everywhere and claim it as public domain. And if you wanted to clean it up and add something to it or play a large clip of it, yep, that's public domain. The reason for that public domain, real quick, is originally the movie was called Night of the Flesh Eaters, and a title card was created, and the whole copyright stuff was on it. But then they decided to make the change, and the distributor, something Reed, I forgot what the name of the company that distributed it was, took down that title card, renamed it Night of the Living Dead without the copyright. And once
I'm reading here the Walter Reed Organization.
Something, yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And when they distributed it that way, all of a sudden it became open and public domain because there wasn't a copyright to it. So, yeah, George Romero even laughs about it every now and then. He says, yeah, I got screwed. But he went on to do so many other things. He's not too concerned about that part. So, but yeah, that's the reason why. Now, as far as my rating, even in its sanitized form, the first time I saw this, I was fortunate enough to see it before I saw Dawn of the Dead. I saw Dawn of the Dead in a theatrical re-release in 1982, and that's when I took my brother to see it at the Palace Theater in the Bronx, New York. But before that, I had seen Night of the Living Dead, even in its sanitized version. I'm like, holy crap. And then Dawn of the Dead is like, oh, this continues on this whole thing. So right from the get-go, I saw what this was. A lot more than Rosemary's Baby, which was a little too cerebral for me to, take it all in. So like I said, only in retrospect did I give Rosemary's Baby such a large rating. But Night of the Living Dead from day one was 5 coffee cups, man.
All right.
That was, 5 coffee cups of Bustelo Black, with an extra shot in there. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
All the way.
That's awesome. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We these are the 2 films that we celebrate 50 years this October in existence. 2 films that have helped define the cinematic scope of horror.
Yep.
As we now know it as today. And I'm not talking about that jump scare stuff.
No.
I'm talking about the stuff that keeps your lights on at
Absolutely.
night. All right? So why don't we just call it what it is and call it the beginning of the horror genre that we all grew up and loved. Please, by all means, if any of you have not seen these films, go check it out.
Yep.
They're available. They're out there.
Yep. Absolutely.
Go see it. Go see the remakes, too. They're pretty cool, too. I like the remakes.
The 4K version of Night of the Living Dead that's coming out, there's going to be some extra interviews, Frank Darabont, so many other, people that were influenced by it. Obviously, Frank Darabont was originally with The Walking Dead. He was co-created together with Robert Kirkman of the first season, which I believe it was the best one. But anyway, they all talk about the influences of George A. Romero and Night of the Living Dead, and there's so many additional tidbits in that one. I don't know when that's going to be released. I just read about it, as a 4K release that was cleaned up, and I'm dying to get my hands on it.
I got to buy a 4K.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got my Blu-ray.
Absolutely.
I need my 4K. Anyway, So on that note, we're gonna sign off. This is Silvio. Thank you.
My
For
pleasure.
being a guest
Yep.
on Horror and Coffee. You know your stuff, dude, and that's one of the reasons why we did this, because I found a fellow horror fan here that really knows his
A
stuff.
brother from another mother.
Exactly. So we'll do more of these. If you're a Patreon subscriber, thank you for listening, and hey, we'll be back. I'll be back with more Horror and Coffee. Silvio will most likely be with me too, because I'm gonna probably need his help in some of the kind of figuring out some of this other stuff that's to come. So make sure you tune in to Wide Range Media, to our podcast with Alex and Pablo every week on the week, and we'll see you there. I'll see you on my YouTube channel, Strange Planet NYC, where I review movies and previews to movies. And Silvio, you also have some.
Oh, you can catch me also, obviously, on Wide Range Media. I'd like to talk with Pablo, Ralph, and Alex, and also on About Men Radio, where I discuss different things with my buddies from way back when, from the Bronx. We grew up together, a whole group of 50-plus guys, revisiting nostalgic views of growing up in the Bronx and how that has made us to the people that we are today.
Sounds good to me. Well, I'm going to turn 50 next year, so maybe I can join you guys. All right, so on that note, good night, and until next time, take care.
Happy horror.